Welcome to Go Green Radio, everybody. Today is going to be so fun. We have Tom Szaky with us. He's the CEO of TerraCycle. And we're going to be talking about not just their awesome backstory and all the things that they do, but we're going to be talking about the future of the company. And I'm excited to bring it to you guys because I really feel like the future of TerraCycle is aligned with the future of our waste stream around the world. What they're doing is so innovative, so disruptive that I think it really could change the whole face of waste. And in fact, they're on a mission to eliminate the whole idea of waste. So I'm really excited to welcome Tom to Go Green Radio. Glad to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Well, a lot of our listeners, this is season 19 for Go Green Radio, and a lot of our listeners are avid recyclers. They've set zero waste goals for themselves, but they're really frustrated with what is and what is not accepted in their local municipal recycling program. So, talk to us about how TerraCycle can help fill that gap and help our listeners reach their zero waste goals. How do average people engage with TerraCycle?
Yeah, absolutely. So we fill that gap as you just described, So the first thing one should do is locally recycle everything you can, your cardboard boxes, PET bottles, aluminum cans, and whatever else your local recycling accepts. And let's be aware, 1 in 3 Americans live where there is no local recycling. And for 2 out of 3 of us, our recycling will change zip code by zip code. And this has to do with what the capabilities of those local recyclers are. So what TerraCycle focuses on is providing recycling solutions to those objects, which could be, a bicycle helmet to a plastic glove, from a juice pouch to a cigarette butt, that are not locally recyclable. You could recycle that through us. And the easiest way to do that is you go to our website at terracycle.com. And first, please check out our free programs. These are programs that have costs but are funded by brands and retailers, so they're free to the public, where the costs of picking up the waste from you are covered. The cost of recycling it is fully covered. And in many of the programs, you also receive some incentive that you can then allocate to any school or charity in the country. And that's totaled, I think, about $50 million or so has been donated out to schools and charities over the past 25 years. And then if you don't find a service that's free, there are paid solutions for just about everything else that you want to see recycled.
Well, and I know you can set up an account on
Mhm.
TerraCycle, and it's so easy to navigate your website. And one of the things I love about your website is watching all the videos, like learning how your process works, because it really is innovative. I have taken students on field trips of a lot of material recovery facilities over the years, and nothing's really changed.
Mm.
And I feel like it's the same thing as like the dentist. I go to my dentist, I'm like, really? We're still using toothbrushes? Can't we advance? And I feel the same way with the solid waste industry. The whole process is almost exactly the same as what my grandparents did. And so I love the fact that TerraCycle is doing in a profitable way what the solid waste industry says is too hard. Talk to us about
Yeah.
how your company does things differently from the way our local municipal solid waste system works.
You touch on a lot of things around why 25 years ago I got very fascinated with the waste industry because sort of zooming out, if you will, to zoom in to answer your question, waste is a topic that's filled with so many anomalies and is also then very purposeful to solve, which is why it's been so attractive to me. Some interesting anomalies is that first, I mean, you mentioned our grandparents, waste was really only invented 75 years ago. If we were you and I talking to each other, say in the 1940s, we would be sitting on a chair made from wood, maybe some metal bits. Our clothing would be all natural materials, cotton, wool, maybe some silk or whatever. If we were eating lunch, maybe it's, all in its own natural packaging, like the peel of a banana, the skin of an apple. Today, both you and I are sitting on amazing chairs, but that are made from synthetic materials. Our clothing is 60% chance polyester, nylon, other synthetics. And if we're eating food, it's probably came to us and is potentially packaged in all sorts of, again, very exciting advanced materials that nature, unfortunately, has no systems for. And then we today consume 10 times more stuff than we did back then. And that's the recipe for waste. It is also, and this will answer the question on why some things are recyclable and not, is that the economics of waste are very odd. It's the only material in the world that we are willing to pay to get rid of. And actually, that is the legal definition of garbage in some countries. Like in Japan, you ask, when is an object, not a product, but waste? and then governed by the rules and regulations of waste, it's when you are willing to pay to get rid of it. That's the moment it shifts. And that actually then crosses really well into what drives recyclability, because we many times perceive recycling as a public service, like medicine, right? And in medicine, the idea is that if the cure exists, you should hope to have it administered. Um, but if it doesn't, then you're going to hope for an R&D breakthrough, that it's invented, and then you would get the cure. And many times that's how we look at recycling. We say, well, a cardboard box is recyclable because it can be, but a toothbrush is not recyclable because it cannot be. It's hard to do. And the reality is somewhat different. Garbage companies are all for-profit companies. They're there to serve their shareholders, and they will then only provide recycling solutions to the things that are profitable to recycle, where the cost of collecting and processing it is less than what you can sell the output material for, such as corrugate, like paper or plastics of certain kinds. Inversely, 95% of the objects we consume are not recyclable, not because they can't be, but because they cost more to collect and process than the outputs are worth. And extreme examples would be like a dirty diaper or a cigarette butt, right? It costs a lot to collect and process this stuff, and the value is pretty low of the outputs. And that's the TerraCycle idea, is we focus on those non-profitable waste streams. And our solution, I mean, yes, there's R&D and all this work to figure it out, but the real key is making sure there's a business model around it. And once we figured out someone willing to pay to see something recycled, then we can very much set up that particular supply chain.
Amazing. I mean, the economics of recycling is something that we even talk with high school students about
Yeah.
so that they understand, why we have this system in place. And I go back to my first recollection of becoming aware of TerraCycle. I saw a box in a school. I have a nonprofit organization called the Go Green Initiative. My listeners know this. I talk about it all the time because it is my passion, just like your company is yours. And we have been working in K through 12 public schools across the US since 2002. And the teachers and the students were so excited to have that box because previously they'd had to put pens and dry erase markers and things like that into the trash, and they knew where it was going to go, and they were so uncomfortable with it. And so they really celebrated the freedom of being able to send those items to you guys and know that you were going to recycle them.
Yeah.
Talk to us about how, like, schools, churches, and
Yeah.
other organizations can work with TerraCycle.
Absolutely. And this is a real cornerstone for how TerraCycle functions, is working with public locations, places of worship, educational facilities, all sorts of different places, libraries, police stations, so on and so forth. If we all go somewhere to congregate during the day, adults probably at work, kids probably at school, and then we have all sorts of other places we hang out sporadically. These places are great public locations to have folks drop off waste that is interesting to that location. And the right way to do it is just go to our site and check out all the absolutely free programs that exist. There's hundreds of them that are all funded by great brands who are voluntarily choosing to take responsibility over that waste stream. And it's super simple. You just sign up, put out any box you wish, and then start filling it with the waste stream or waste streams that you have signed up for. Then, when it's full, you just go back to our site, request a free shipping label, throw that into either FedEx or UPS, whichever you prefer. And then when we receive it, we check it in, recycle everything inside. And then in many programs, you'll see these incentives where you can earn points that are fully redeemable for money to your favorite school or charity. So if you're, collecting at your, local elementary school, that school can earn money. Or if it doesn't need the money, it could maybe donate it to their favorite charity or organization in the country. And this has been a great vehicle to be able to get folks engaged in recycling what they cannot locally recycle and do something nice for society, near them or whatever they may care about.
I love that. I love it. And it really is just that simple. I mean,
Yeah,
your website makes it so simple. Now, I got to ask, what about local governments? Because I know,
yeah,
in most cases, cities engage in a franchise agreement with a waste hauling company for
that's
pickup,
right.
recycling, composting for their residents. And then the items that are deemed recyclable or compostable are largely driven by what the waste hauler can sell, as you
That's
mentioned.
right.
What if there's a local city council member out there or a city manager who's watching, and they want more for their city? Can
Yeah.
a local government engage with TerraCycle to recycle things that their local waste hauler can't find a market for?
Oh, absolutely. And we do this in quite a scale across a whole range of opportunities. So it could be as simple as today, I think just in North America alone, we work with, I believe, a few thousand cities, from large ones like the city of Toronto and New York, all the way to small, tiny villages on doing things like citywide cigarette recycling, which is again a free program in both the US and Canada, all the way to all sorts of other waste streams that might be interesting at a city level, because the city has the city itself. So cigarettes are a good one because they're the most littered waste stream in America today. So collecting, where there's high traffic areas and high consumption of that product. We're also, just as we speak, rolling out a national vape recycling program, which is really important because if you today collect vapes, so schools might confiscate them, airports might take them away. Vapes are e-waste with lithium batteries inside and hold nicotine. So they're a whole, headache from a disposal point of view. And otherwise, you would have to pay a fortune to hazardously dispose them. Through TerraCycle, you can actually pay less and have them fully recycled. So there's lots of options at that level. But then there's also cities have all sorts of public buildings, your public library, your, fire station, police station, all sorts of other sort of city infrastructure. And each of those locations may have waste that could be recycled through our platforms. Again, either paid solutions or free solutions. So there's lots and lots of options. And what's really cool, if you're, work in city government, is we have a strategic partnership department. So if you contact our customer service line and just say, hey, you're a city administrator or wherever you work, we will then connect you to a special team who can then talk to you and work with you on what might make sense for your local community. And again, the key punchline here is a lot of these choices are absolutely free. So that's why I always recommend start with those first.
That's amazing. Kind of switching gears a little bit, Tom, I've been hosting this show since 2008, and I distinctly remember a time when some of my guests were putting the onus on
Mhm.
consumers when it came
Yeah,
to waste. I mean, we were getting messages like, vote with your dollars, which I agree with, and they would say things like, don't buy wet dog food from a plastic container, buy it from a can because that's recyclable. And some of my listeners would email me and they'd be like, okay. A, what if my dog likes the food in the plastic container better, aka Rachel Ray? And B, I feel like I'm gonna have a panic attack every time I go to the grocery store because all I'm seeing is landfill waste,
yeah.
2 weeks from now. In your view, Tom, where does the responsibility
Mm.
lie for the availability of recyclable or reusable packaging?
God, it's a great question. And what I would say is it lies on all stakeholders simultaneously. No one's off the hook, right? And the best way to point a finger is inward, right? Now, we are all individual consumers. So yes, we have to take that vote seriously. It's the most fiercely democratic vote we have, which is what we buy and especially what we don't buy. And by the way, recycling is not a silver bullet. Reuse is not a silver bullet. The only silver bullet in all sustainability is not purchasing something. So we
Mhm.
all should point internally because all of us, no matter where we work, are individual consumers and contribute to, what shows up on shelf tomorrow, which is what we buy. Now, we also, though, work somewhere. Some of us may be lawmakers. Some of us may work at, manufacturing corporations, retail corporations, all sorts of different companies. And there we should constantly advocate for those organizations shifting their policies, their purchasing decisions, and their what they produce in the right direction. And the right direction is really thinking through how do we make sure that we avoid waste whatsoever. So no packaging or longevity on products, so they're not made to break incredibly quickly. And then how do we make sure these objects can be reused and repaired and refilled or recycled? And worst case, trying to eliminate disposal in every possible method. So I think we should look in all places because the moment we don't point inward, we're letting ourselves off the hook. And we are both an individual consumer as well as some member of typically a larger organization. Even if we're a kid, we're
Mhm.
at a school. We can influence the school to be, to make the right decisions. But we have to influence our organization and we have to influence ourselves at the very same time.
That's one of the best answers I've ever gotten to that question, and I have asked a lot of people. So thank you for that, Tom. We've got to take a quick commercial break, but don't go away, folks. We have much more Go Green Radio right after this. Welcome back to Go Green Radio, everybody. I'm so glad that you tuned in. We are having a ball today because we have Tom Szaky with us. He's the founder and CEO of TerraCycle, and I'm such a big fan of the company and what they do, and I'm really excited about what they are going to do. And we'll be talking about that in a little bit. But Tom, first, I want to talk to you about how you quantify the success of your company from a waste perspective. How much stuff have you kept out of the waste stream, and how does that translate into environmental benefits?
Absolutely. So we are a mission-driven business, which means we care about three different major stakeholders: profit, planet, and people. So profit, and we look at profit a little differently. We are a for-profit business because it is easier to raise capital, grow, govern, and really do this on a global basis. And so we have maintained profitability, but we view profit really as an indicator of health, not as the core reason of our existence. That then leaves the first major outcome, which is planet. So we are first and foremost an environmental company, and what we focus on is how much waste do we move up the hierarchy of waste. And as we think about that, the worst thing to do with waste is litter it. So through the TerraCycle Foundation, we do a lot of work in high-risk litter prevention, high risk being litter in very high-risk places. So for example, in Bangkok, in Thailand, we run the city's biggest river cleanup system, where, today 30% of waste in Thailand and Bangkok is littered, and we capture as much of that as we can before it ends up in oceans. That would be an example of a high risk. And there, it's I would say it's about a few million pounds of this material is being captured on an annual basis from a quantification point of view. Above that, we then look at how do we move from disposal to recycling, which is what we've talked a lot about today. How do we recycle those things that are hard to recycle? And there's two ways to look at that. One is the environmental benefit. The environmental benefit is somewhere 70 to 30% reduction in greenhouse gases when you move from landfilling or incinerating locally to recycling with TerraCycle. And then the volume, you could look at it as a numeric basis, like we're about to celebrate our billionth cigarette butt collected and recycled, or our, I think, half a billionth coffee capsule collected and recycled. Another way to look at it is what percent of a product's production are we getting back? And some of our programs might be modest, but some that have grown and flourished. We collect back, for example, in Canada, 30% of Nespresso capsules that are produced come back. Or in the UK, 15% of pharmaceutical blister packs that are sold in major pharmacies, and many other such examples. Then from there, we think about how do we move from recycling to reuse, which saves another, call it 40, 50% on climate change type gases like greenhouse gases. And this is because you are not just recovering the material the waste is made from, like its composition, but you're recovering also its form and its idea and just cleaning it and refilling it. And there you see that improvement. And again, it's these large quantities of units that move through the ecosystem. And then the goal is how do you do more the year after than the year before? And relatively one way you can say these are all great big numbers, but I would also say there's a very long way to go, because the waste issue is just so catastrophically big. And it's getting bigger every day. Every day we produce more garbage and recycle less.
That's a fact. I hate to admit this, but I was up at 5:30 this morning crunching numbers. I was doing my favorite verb, spreadsheeting,
Mm.
on some waste and recycling percentages in some of the communities that we serve, and looking at the impact of some of our recycling outreach programs. It was good, but still sobering to still see so much waste. I want to let you know something. I know somebody who is going to be very interested in this next question because his company is the official recycling partner of the Buffalo Bills,
Mm.
and he's on my board. And so I just read on your website some news that you guys had your industrial design and art team selected to create custom upcycled work from hard to recycle materials, including ocean-bound plastic, cigarette butts, and potato chips at the Buffalo Bills Stadium.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that our listeners know about your industrial design and art
Mm.
team. I'd love for you to tell us more about this project because I know that my board member is listening and will be very interested, but also about some of the other industrial
Yeah.
design and art services.
So we look at there's three ways to circulize, if you will, or circulate waste, right? And you've heard already the term recycling and reuse, but there's a middle one, upcycling. And so the simple way to think about these three terms is if you take an object and you break it into three concepts. One is the composition of an object. What is it made from? So if I have a plastic cup, it would be made from plastic. Their recycling valorizes the composition. But the object is not just plastic granules in my hand, it has a form, right? And it's shaped as a cup. And that also costs money to produce. Upcycling is where you valorize the form and the composition, but not the intention of the product. Reuse, which is the highest level, is where you're valorizing all three things. You know, the idea of the product, its intention, its form, the shape, and its composition, because you just clean it and use it again. So our industrial design team really focuses on that middle vector, the upcycling vector, where they come up with the most amazing upcycled developments. And upcycled developments could be mass production. So it could be making 1 million backpacks from sewn together juice pouches, as we have, and selling them at Walmart, all the way to, like the Buffalo Bills example, these beautiful artistic deployments. Even our offices all over the world, every detail of them is made from upcycled waste. And we've had the privilege of working with amazing organizations like the Buffalo Bills all the way to the Super Bowl. We've even made every Olympic podium since the Tokyo Olympic Games in this fashion. In Tokyo, it was waste collected by the Japanese public to make their podium. In France, for example, for the Paris Games, which just happened, it was waste collected from the canals and rivers in the spirit of cleaning up the rivers so that the triathletes and others could swim in them. But what I love about upcycling, and this, effectively, it's like our industrial art department, is it really shows the waste. Sometimes when you look at a recycled object, it takes a leap to understand that that's made from plastic gloves and cigarette butts and this, that, and the other. But when it's upcycled, it's really staring you in the face, and you really get a good sense of what it's all about. It's why we make all of our offices from upcycled waste, because you're just living inside the concept of that waste doesn't have to be wasted.
I love it. And really some of the pieces that I've seen that your team has created are just remarkably beautiful. And you
Yeah,
think that
yeah,
seems like such an oxymoron, beautiful waste, but
yeah.
it really speaks to the soul in a deep way to see some of those pieces. You mentioned all the some of the partnerships that you have, and I mean, your company is one of the most incredible collaborators I've ever seen. And I'd love to give you a chance to talk about some of the organizations you've partnered with to advocate for a circular economy, and
Yeah.
what would you consider some of the wins for TerraCycle in the advocacy arena?
Yeah, absolutely. So while we don't lobby, we have the privilege of being brought in as subject matter experts constantly in these discussions around circular economy regulation and legislation. And that could be at a local level. A lot of times cities bring us in to advise them on regulations they're thinking about, state level, federal level, all the way to the global level, where we are, official observers at the United Nations plastic treaty work, all the way to co-chair the World Economic Forum's reuse work stream, and many other discussions. And what I would say is that it's really important regulation and regulation moving in the right direction, because in voluntary systems, there's only so much that will happen, right? Because a voluntary system, like for us, for example, to go to a brand and say, hey, please fund the recycling of your waste, they'll do it if they can see some form of benefit to their brand, right? And that's usually how that sort of thing works. If a brand is sponsoring the Ocean Conservancy, they're doing it because it's somehow paying back and getting them more market share or more brand love or whatever it may be. And there's a limit to that at some point. And so mandatory action, which is really the domain of regulation, and maybe also subsidizing that action, is incredibly valuable. Now, you've asked about wins. I would say one great example is in France. We've been able to work with the local French federal government, where they have enacted such strict reuse regulations that reuse has now really flourished. So they have mandated, for example, that supermarkets must dedicate 10% of their floor space to reuse by 2027, which is just next year, and producing really substantial fiscal subsidies to help offset the cost of scaling reuse because it has to compete against single-use consumption. We also have worked really closely, for example, here in the US with CAA and all of the
Yep.
lawmakers that are adopting EPR. And
Yep.
we are seeing EPR roll out in America, albeit in a fragmented way, state by state by state. But that's incredible because had you asked me 10 years ago, do I see EPR coming here? I would have probably said no. And EPR is so important to create a fiscal flow because in the end, why do we have a waste crisis? We have a waste crisis because we don't have to take responsibility over that externality. And that, by the way, is the issue for sustainability. We can create you and I, Jill, could have a sushi company and we could take all this fish out of the ocean, but we have no responsibility to replenish it.
Yep.
And EPR now says, no, there has to be a fiscal flow. And that starts making folks understand that we have to, own this and that there's a financial consequence to it. And that really is a bedrock for then layering on more advanced, both mandatory and voluntary systems. So, we always applaud regulation. I think it's a little challenging in America now we're sort of in a deregulation moment. But I think this is a great opportunity for states to step up if we're not going to see that federally occur. And it's something that we should always try to push as much as possible because it only helps these types of activities be able to gain traction and also maintain.
Absolutely. Well, and I live in California, and I'm on the implementation working group that Heidi Sanborn has convened, and we're working on SB 54, which
Yeah,
is exactly that, extended
that's right.
producer responsibility for these products. I want to just like applaud you and say how excited I am about all of the jobs that you've created, Tom. I mean, I work with a lot of young adults who desperately want to find a job that
Yeah,
aligns with their values for a
yeah.
more just and sustainable world. When you hire someone at TerraCycle, what are you looking for?
It's a great question. Now, I would say it depends on the role, right? So there will be specialist roles, in R&D where we need someone to have polymer science background or legal where they need to have a law degree and so on and so forth. But the vast majority of our roles are not such roles, They are don't require necessarily some prior formal education. And there, what we're looking for, I would say, is first a passion for the topic, that you care about the mission that we're trying to put forward because we are very much a mission-driven business that needs to maintain profitability. And so we need folks to believe and want to, care about the overall mission. And then from there, it's how much grit do you have and how hard you're willing to work, because that really is what moves it forward. What is more challenging in a mission-driven business than in a traditional business is that we also have to steward for the mission, not just our profitability, which is extra work. Right. And so, we want folks who are really, willing to roll up their sleeves and work hard. And I think a lot of the tradecraft, if you will teach along the way, on how do you unlock recycling of hard to recycle things or bring out reuse. That's a lot of the stuff that we've also learned on the ground on how to do. And we're happy to share that and to teach that. There's also lots of really cool internship programs, so we bring on about 50 interns just in the US every year, and we do operate in 20 countries around the world. So if you happen to be listening from, the UK or Canada or Australia, all these countries have local teams and local offices where the exact same work takes place.
That's so awesome. And I think that's a great message for young adults. If you want to work in, an industry or a company like yours, that's, it's growing, it's expanding, but it's mission driven. Grit is a great word.
Yeah.
And I think that's great advice. We're going to take a quick commercial break, but we have lots more to talk about. So don't go away, folks. There's more Go Green Radio right after this. Welcome back to Go Green Radio, everybody. We're having so much fun. We have Tom Szaky, who's the founder and CEO of TerraCycle, on with us. And it's just an amazing company. You've got to get out on their website, terracycle.com. They've got a lot of great videos that will show you their process, some of their goals, some of their wins. It's just really interesting. It's a great place to information snack if you want to know about some of the most innovative things going on in recycling right now. Tom, one of the things that I understand about your future focus is that you're looking to attract some investors. You've got some great plans to expand. And one of the things that folks may want to know is that you can legally guarantee that you recycle the waste
Yes.
that is sent to you. And I want you to talk to us about your audit process. How do we know, that everything is on the up and up?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's two questions, right? So I'll talk about the first one first, which is our legal guarantee for full recycling. How does that work? Because that's pretty special and different than traditional recycling. And then what does our entire track and trace auditability look like? So first and foremost, on the guarantee to recycle, why is this different? Most recycling companies, as we mentioned earlier in the discussion, focus on recycling what they can make money at, where it's the objects that where the cost to collect and process is lower than what you can sell those outputs for. And here's a great example. In some material like colored PET, depending on what region of the world you're recycling it in, clear PET, like a clear soda bottle, will be profitable, but the moment there's color in it, it might fall into the not profitable category. And there, a recycler might sort out the clear ones, but dispose the green ones, which is why in recycling, we constantly talk about this concept of yield. Yield is how much comes in, and then of that, how much is disposed and how much is recycled. At TerraCycle, we are intrinsically focusing on those waste streams that cost more to collect and process than the results are worth. And this is the beauty of our model. As a result, we're not dependent on raw material output prices. So if we were be dependent on that, we would be saying, well, we're not going to take this and we're going to take that. But if we're not dependent on output raw material values, that is just a subsidy on the total cost of our system. And so what we do when we collect in waste, we're not waiting for a certain price of a material to be hit. We are saying, what can the market afford that this output is purchased for? So we might say recycle chip bags into automotive parts. We'll just call those manufacturers and say, what would you pay for this? And that then sets the price for the entire process and allows us to always be profitably recycling things that intrinsically don't have economic value in them. And that then allows us to pass forward a recycling guarantee. Now, the things that we don't recycle, that the guarantee doesn't extend to, if you're, say, collecting and recycling plastic gloves with us, if you put in something that is not a plastic glove, well, that won't be recycled, and residual content. So if you're recycling, say, toothpaste tubes, we will, in the process of recycling them, wash off the residual toothpaste that might be, in there. And to give a sense of volume of this, about 1.7% of our input is contamination, which is quite low, but it's still 1.7%. And if there is material like cosmetic waste or oral care waste or any sort of food packaging that has residual food or content residue, that's about 2% of the weight of the input. Now, from there, right, we own some of our supply chain. We outsource some of our supply chain. So we put a lot of effort and resource into auditing the supply chain. We work annually with Bureau Veritas, which is a major auditing company who since 2021 has annually been auditing our supply chain successfully. Our operations team is always out in the field, doing audits and checking out what's going on. And then, as you mentioned earlier, we work with most of the world's biggest brands. They also consistently are auditing us because they're making claims based on, the work that we do. And this is something that we work on continuously improving and making sure is as strong and really leading the industry as much as possible. So if you were, say, a business that were to work with us, one of the things that we grant is formal audit rights in your contracts with us so that you can come visit, not just sort of theoretical transparency, but like baked in legal transparency where you can come in and review absolutely everything in our supply chain.
That's really amazing. And I know that a lot of like material recovery facilities might get audited every now and again from the County Waste Management
Yeah.
Authority or something like that. There's nothing as rigorous as this. This is really exciting.
Yeah, we
Uh,
think it's top tier, but there's always then what else do we keep, how do we keep
yeah.
strengthening that and making that, constantly leading edge?
Uh-huh. I love that continuous improvement mindset. You're leading from the front, and that's
Yeah.
really an amazing thing about TerraCycle. It's like part of your fabric. Now, you've mentioned some of the brands that you work with that we haven't named any yet, and I don't know if you're comfortable with it, but
Sure.
you have a very long and distinguished list.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to give you a chance to talk about some of your partnerships with these brands and some of the case studies of success.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we work with most major retailers and brands, both B2C and B2B. So that could be retailers like Walmart, Kroger, Carrefour, all sorts of major retailers, but hundreds of them. And then on brands, I don't think there's a major brand we don't work with, but examples could be like Procter and Gamble or Unilever or Nestle or Mars and so on. So if you pick, any one of these, like with Procter and Gamble, we run 30 different recycling programs around the world. Everything from Gillette's recycling program, I think in 4 countries, all the way to recycling for brands like Febreze and others. So think in Gillette, it's all the blades and razors that aren't locally recyclable today. In air care, it could be the aerosol containers, all the way to plugins and so on. If we shift over to a company like Nestle, we run coffee capsule recycling with them in many countries around the world, all the way to a company like Mars pet food bags, that might come off their brands. And that's the consumer facing side. On the industrially facing side, or sorry, on the B2B side, it could be, we do a lot in life science, so work with most major pharmaceutical companies in collection and recycling of, say, pharmaceutical packaging or laboratory waste like centrifuge tubes to pipette tips, all the way to construction, where we work with, major suppliers on hard hat recycling or safety equipment recycling. And I think there's actually not an industry that exists, whether you pick athletics, we run Nike's shoe recycling program in Korea or ASICS's shoe recycling program in 5 countries. There's not an industry, that you could look at where we don't, do some form of work with these large organizations. It's something that we're incredibly proud of and really builds on 25 years of global work.
That's incredible. Now, I have to say, TerraCycle it cracked me up when you guys made a mockumentary a few years
Hmm.
ago called
Yeah.
Human Resources. That was hilarious. And for listeners who may not be aware of Human Resources, you can check it out on Tubi for free. But you guys have really scaled up
Yeah.
since
Yeah.
those days. And I'd love to have you talk about how you've scaled your operations since that time and how your capacity has changed over the last few years.
Yeah, it was, by the way, it was really fun. We did 4 seasons of you're absolutely right. The right way to call it would be like a mockumentary. Each season was about 10 episodes. Each episode followed us as we solved the waste stream. What's really important is there was a bit of reenactment going on, but it was all real projects, right? That had occurred. It originally aired on a network called Pivot, which, I mean, since streaming came on, some of the networks went away, but you can get it on Tubi, as you mentioned, but also iTunes and or Apple TV and Amazon, like Prime. You can download it there as well. But that was, 10 years ago. And we were
Yeah.
honestly a tenth of the size. Today we're about 500 team members, just under 100 million in revenue. And we have brought real scale and sophistication, to what we do. Some examples of, some of this is we run, for example, most of Maine's EPR system for e-waste, all the way to, major developments in universal waste like light bulbs, batteries, really complicated things that have a lot of regulations on how do we collect and recycle them. Since that sort of, 10 years ago in the TV show time, we've also now created the world's largest reuse platform, which is really thriving in Europe, especially in France. And so we keep investing as much as we can in how do we really further the idea of eliminating the concept of waste.
I love it. I know that you guys have kind of diversified your business
Mhm.
lines into what I believe are three
Yes.
programs, commercial recycling, and direct e-commerce zero waste boxes. And I'd love to give you a chance to talk to potential investors out
Yeah.
there about how this diversification helps support your company's stability and
Yes.
resilience.
Yeah, absolutely. And if, just you are interested in investing in TerraCycle, there is a website that you should certainly check out, invest.terracycle.com. And before you make any investment, we do report for our US division all of our financials now, I think for close to 5 years to the Securities Exchange Commission. Those are all available for full download. So you get full transparency into the organization, as you would expect from a public company, even though we are not public yet. And so, as you mentioned, yes, we have 3 different segments, and they all might seem, very different, but they all come together from a recycling point of view. So we have programs. Programs are our segment that focuses on partnering with brands and retailers. Typically, that results in free services to the public. So when you look at one of our free programs, that would sit in the program division. And that also has both B2C, so consumer-facing examples, and B2B, more industrially facing examples. And it's in fact about half and half. People think we're typically more B2C and we're more half and half. Now, that fuels our direct segment. Our direct segment is where people can go onto our website and directly purchase our recycling solutions, whether for their homes all the way to their businesses. And what's great is, by running these big, famous recycling programs with the world's biggest brands, they help create a lot of attention to our direct segment. And then finally, an area we've done a lot of investment in. We've acquired three companies. In fact, in just a few days, we're going to be announcing our fourth acquisition. That's all been in our commercial segment. That is really steeped in high regulatory environments where we're collecting and recycling, things from electronic waste to batteries, light bulbs, all sorts of things that require strong permits for transportation and processing and bring a lot of sort of infrastructure capacity to us. And these all come together so that we can really come to an organization and offer just about anything with the exception of disposal services or traditional local recycling. It's only two things that we don't do. We're not going to landfill your waste or incinerate it, and we're not going to offer recycling for things that you could just normally locally recycle. And what's really cool is that's in the US. If we zoom out globally, we have our fourth segment, which is our reuse segment, which while it's not live today in the US, it is flourishing and making wonderful traction in the European market.
And we're going to talk more about that in a little bit because I'm very interested in that program. So we will touch on that for sure. Um, for our listeners who really believe in what you're doing and want to support you and TerraCycle, Tom, tell us in your own view why TerraCycle is a great investment.
Well, I'd say it this way, right? So we started raising capital from the public market through what's called a Reg A investment offering. This allows for non-accredited investors to be able to invest in companies before they are public companies. And we did that for the first time between 2018 and 2020. And there we raised $19 million from investors. And if we look at what happened since then, the company has grown revenue by 93% since those dates, has maintained profitability. We've been profitable for the past 10 years. But if you invested, let's say, $1,000 in that early investment, you would have already gotten back somewhere between 18 and 20% of your capital in dividends. And in fact, the next dividend check is flying just very soon, I think in the next month, which would raise that by another 3 to 5 percentage points. So, if you invested $1, already gotten back after that dividend check, called it about 25 cents, which is very rare for a pre-public company to offer yearly dividends. And we've paid yearly dividends every year. And the company itself has grown. So, we're very proud of the way we have stewarded investors, especially, through this crowdfunding campaign, which is why last year in Q4, we raised another 5 million through this type of crowdfunding platform. In fact, I think we were the first or second best performing crowdfunding campaign in America during that time period. And we just launched a month ago a $75 million capital raise, which is doing great. And again, if any of this is of interest, please don't just invest. Please check out that invest.terracycle.com website. There's a lot of information you can get there, and you can especially go into all the public filings for all of our financials. So you can really see, effectively look under the hood, if you will. And I really encourage anyone to do that before you make any investment decisions. And then, in the future, our goal is to continue to grow, both through acquisitions. As we mentioned, we've completed 4 very successful acquisitions in our commercial sector, but we'll be announcing another one in a matter of days and then hope to keep doing them. And through organic growth, as our company just naturally grows and offers more recycling services and grows those to become larger and bigger contributors to our overall profitability.
Your transparency and almost your fervor for, showing people proof of your success and of the authenticity of your process and your results is so refreshing. A lot of us have felt a little jaded by corporate America over the years, and you're really offering something that I think is going to be appealing to folks who are looking for a brand that they can trust, feel great about, brag to their friends and family about, and really feel like they're part of a winning team. We are going to take a quick commercial break, but when we come back, we're going to ask Tom to look into his crystal ball a little bit. We're going to talk about a few other programs. So we still have a lot to cover. Don't go away, folks. There's more Go Green Radio right after this. Welcome back to Go Green Radio. Our guest today is Tom from TerraCycle. He has been kind of blowing my mind. I have to say, this company is something special, and I don't expect you to get all your information from this episode. We're only hitting the wave tops. Please get out on their website, TerraCycle.com. Um, Tom, you mentioned it in passing a little bit in the last segment, and I want to give you a chance to talk about loop.
Yes.
And I really want our listeners to understand this, and then I want to get your view on how this might work in the US.
Yeah, absolutely. So we thought a lot about, is recycling the foundational solution to waste? And I say this as a recycling company. We landed on no, that it's a great solution to the symptom of waste, like taking a Tylenol if you have a headache, but it's not solving waste at the root cause. And when we really dug in, where we landed that the root cause of waste is disposability, that things just become waste so incredibly fast. And that's a very new concept. Disposability only came onto the scene 75 years ago. And so, in a spirit to how do we go deeper, we've made the biggest investment in our entire history, so far about $50 million. So, for a company our size, that is a massive investment into really furthering reuse. And we did that through a platform we launched called Loop. And basically, the way Loop works is it's a platform for reuse for consumer products. Think like stuff you buy at a supermarket, window cleaner to orange juice, where brands can join and enable reusable versions of their products, which we define as the bottle has to be able to go around at least 10 times or more. And then retailers can make that available to consumers. And the consumer experience is you can go to a supermarket, buy your favorite brands in fully reusable packaging. You just pay a deposit on anything you bought. And then when you're done, you drop them off dirty, no sorting, no cleaning. You get your money back. And then we, as the waste management function of reuse, Loop collects them, sorts them, cleans them, and then it goes back to the manufacturer who refills them and right back on shelf. And this may sound familiar. It's exactly how beverage containers used to function up until about the 1950s. And so we started working on this about a decade ago. And we launched and we ran pilots all over the world in Canada, the US, France, UK, and Japan. And it was an interesting, ride. We were able to partner with 200 of the world's biggest consumer product brands, 40 major retailers, all the biggest and best. And the tough news is that we were not able to get out a pilot in Canada, UK, US, and Japan. The silver lining is Loop has now become the biggest reuse platform in France, where today it's industrially scaled. It's certainly not a pilot anymore. It's in about 700 stores. It's shipping 400 different products from Coca-Cola to Nutella. I mean, world's biggest brands in fully reusable packaging. And in many cases, it's even cheaper for consumers than the disposable alternative. And so what we learned in this journey, because it's both a journey of success in France, but also failure. We weren't able to really make it work in North America, is two things. One is the role of regulation. France has really good regulation that creates tailwind for a platform like Loop. It both mandates reuse, but also helps subsidize it. And I think, frankly, the closest thing to this in North America is Senate Bill 54 in California, which does
Yep.
mention reuse. I think, the tighter we can get that, both mandating it and subsidizing it, it's really, really going to help. And the case study is the whole country of France now can enjoy their favorite mass products and their favorite mass retailers in fully reusable packaging. And again, it becomes more cost effective. Now, the lesson to us, though, internally, because we can't just rely on regulation, is we need to really be empathetic to how chess pieces move on the chessboard. Because if we want to win the game of chess, we can't debate how chess pieces move. We have to, really understand and be empathetic to how they move. And how do corporates move? Generally speaking, a corporation like a manufacturer or retailer wants to make more money by doing and do less work. That could be seen as have higher revenue, make more money. Do less work means higher profitability. And reuse doesn't help in that respect, because when you move a product to reusable, you're not going to have the consumer buy more orange juice or buy more shampoo. They're just going to buy the shampoo not in a disposable but a reusable package. And reuse brings more work. So you're asking the commercial actor to not grow their revenue but increase the work a little bit. So the solution to that, if you really empathize with that, is make the work next to zero. So that's what we've really been able to enable in France. We've found that about a quarter of everything in a supermarket is already in packaging that is conducive to reuse, with next to no operational change if the reuse system behind the scenes can be flexible and can accommodate those package forms. So when you go on shelf in big supermarkets in France and you see all the reusable products, they'll look like they're in their normal packaging. And think about it, like a perfume bottle, a whiskey bottle, a heavy plastic detergent container. Those are already durable enough to be cleaned and refilled 10 times or more. And the beauty is that it actually becomes cheaper because you're not having to buy those expensive packages anymore. You're substituting the cost of purchasing those packages with just the cost of collection, sorting, and some washing. And that's why, a $15 or 15 euro, if you will, whiskey bottle that was normally 15 euro in reuse, it's maybe 5 cents, 5% cheaper, which is phenomenal because now you get this
Mhm.
great, you get reuse is the best from a circularity point of view. Right? It is better than closed loop recycling. It is the very tippity top of what we can do to eliminate waste. And if we can do that and make it commercially simple and even cheaper, then we have a home run. And so what I'm hoping for is we've established that in France. We're going to see more expansion. We just signed with a number of retailers in the UK.
Mhm.
And my hope is that we just actually talked to a whole group from the US who came out to Paris last week, all the sort of big NGOs in this space, as you can imagine, from the Ocean Conservancy to others who are really championing this. They were just out in Paris with us last week. They're now seeing it in the flesh that it's not academic, it's industrially scaled. And my hope is that in the coming years we can bring that learning and start deploying, say at minimum in California, but at maximum at a federal level. I mean, why not? And so we hope that'll be
Absolutely.
certainly the case.
Let me ask you this. Well, and you don't have to answer, but you mentioned CAA
Yes,
earlier, and I was hoping they've seen this because they're the ones that are organizing a lot of the
they are.
PROs.
Yeah.
And so, I want them to get as excited as I
Well,
am
I'll
right
tell you
now.
something really, really fun on that. The reuse team at CAA are both, two of them are, the team is two folks, and they're both former Loop team members.
Awesome.
How fun is that?
Okay. That is fun. That is fun. And actually, I was just on a meeting, last, I think a couple 3 days ago, and of the implementation working group for SB
Yeah,
54. And I'm going to go back to them and talk about this story. They may want to hear from you. So put a
anytime.
pin in that.
Yeah,
But I'm very excited about Loop, and I hope that you continue to see the kind of success and learn the kind of lessons that can help you uh, onshore it,
yes.
so to
Yeah, we're
speak.
working very hard on that, and it's our biggest investment and will continue to be. And my dream is to bring it here so I can enjoy it myself.
Absolutely. I can totally understand the pride that would, give you. I want to give you a chance to look into your crystal ball, Tom, because I just feel like, you're such an exciting business leader to talk with, and I can only imagine what's going on between your ears. Um, and I want you to tell us if all of your plans come to fruition. You don't have to tell us all of your plans, because, I want you to be number one, and succeed. But if your plans come to fruition, how will TerraCycle be different 10 years from now? And caveat to that, how will the world's waste system be
Yeah.
different 10 years from now as a result of your work if your plans come to fruition?
Yeah, it's a great question. We've always viewed ourselves as sort of like the Google of waste. We want to show that waste, which is objectively, measurably the least innovative industry per dollar of revenue it enjoys, we want to show that it can be fiercely innovative and in a very purposeful direction, on effectively how do we solve for the concept of waste. Now, that may seem as a big, hairy idea, but let's remember waste is only 75 years old as a concept altogether. And so my hope is as we continue to grow, and that's why it's so important to show that we can do this in a for-profit context, not a non-profit context, because it will spur competition. And it will spur other companies to, go in a similar direction. When we launched Loop, there was very little in the reuse landscape, and there was this whole ecosystem of companies that emerged looking at the work we did and competing. And I think that's absolutely fantastic. My hope, and whether it's a decade from now or a few decades from now, but I really hope in my lifetime, I see that there is a potential for us to escape this massive trajectory of garbage, that we're on today. I don't think in my lifetime we'll wake up and be like, the concept of garbage is gone, because it is so challenged and it is so foundationally economically challenged that it's going to be a lot of cost to deal with it, right? But I hope that we can have the hope that there is a path to eliminate the idea, and that our work furthers that, and other people who are inspired by it further it, because it's something that we do have to end. It is not a natural concept. It should not exist. It hasn't been with humanity for most of humanity. I really hope one day we wake up and it was like, what an anomaly that weird garbage moment was that we lived through at some point in our history.
Tom, I want to give you 20 seconds, 30 seconds at the most to give us some parting thoughts. What would you like to leave our listeners with?
I think it's what you had asked about earlier. What can we do? And I think that we all have this tremendous power, and we are exercising it whether we know it or not, right? We need to influence the way we live, because this entire idea of hyper disposable consumption, we voted in as people just recently. Let's vote it out.
Mhm.
But then we can't just do that as individuals. Let's make sure we influence anywhere we can influence. We can influence the organizations we work in, and then we have the
Absolutely.
privilege once in a while to vote and influence the political landscape. And please raise your voice, use your dollar, because you're doing it anyway. Silence is a vote, and no matter how you spend money, it is a vote. And so I think let's take that seriously and exercise that, because enough of us who go in the right direction will be able to create a change. And where we've seen change occur, it's been because that exactly has happened.
Perfectly said. Thank you so much for joining us, Tom. And thanks to all of our listeners for joining as well. We'll be here same time, same place next week with more Go Green Radio. Until then, have a wonderful week and do something in your life to go green.